In May of 1980, she was the victim of a violent crime, which took her eyesight and nearly her life. In April of 1981, she began speaking out on behalf of victims of crime, telling of her own experiences and offering a message of hope, self-motivation, perseverance, and determination. It's an honor to introduce to you Sharon D'Eusanio.
Something as simple as a drive home turned into a life-changing experience. While driving home one evening in May of 1980, a man in a passing car fired 3 shots into my view. One of those bullets passed directly through both of my eyes. It took my eyesight completely.
Sharon's decision not to give her attacker any more of her life helped her move on. Her experiences led her to become a victim's advocate, and today she represents the Florida Attorney General as the Victim Services Administrator in the Civil Rights Division. This agency represents all victims of crime in Florida, including people with disabilities.
Years ago, we had advocates who were advocating for victims' rights. And everything changed with the passage of the Victims of Crime Act in 1984. And that was because it brought forth money, more money for crime victims' compensation, for direct service programs, and it really started filling out the entire field. And then, around the same time, there were advocates with disabilities who were advocating for inclusion and for rights for people with disabilities. And that really culminated in the landmark legislation of the 1990 ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, because what that act did, it provided access for people with disabilities to gain access to various aspects of life, to be included in education, employment, provide access to transportation. But they were 2 distinctly separate, parallel systems. One was advocating for the rights of crime victims, the other advocating for the rights of people with disabilities. I had a young lady come up to me when I was speaking in Corpus Christi, Texas a few years ago. She was a consumer at a Center for Independent Living. And I was talking about the advances and how far we've come, but how so much farther we have yet to go. She said, "I've had a disability all my life. I've been victimized all my life. Why now?" And I really couldn't find a good answer. I said, you know what? People are finally listening. We finally have the legislation in place that is going to put you into the community, to get you, people with disabilities, out of institutions and into the mainstream of life. But then you run the risk of becoming a victim. So we had to prepare the victims' assistance movement to be able to meet the needs of people with disabilities should they become victims of any type of crime. So finally, someone was listening. And the federal government, the state governments, activists, advocates were listening, finally. So I said, help is finally arriving.
Crime statistics historically have not counted people with disabilities as victims. A California study reports that people with developmental disabilities are 4 to 10 times greater at risk of becoming crime victims. People like Sharon D'Eusanio are working hard to make sure that people who are victims of crime know their rights and find justice.
What I really think is important, when I started speaking years ago, I didn't know who my audiences were. But I knew just by virtue of the statistics that there were going to be some victims of crime in the audience. What I wanted to do was provide individuals with some hope, that there is hope and there is life after victimization. You just need to get the help that you need, the counseling that you need, whatever it is that you need to be able to put that victimization in perspective. It becomes part of your past. And the secret to moving forward is that ability to overcome. What I try to get people to do is not to merely cope with what had happened to them, but to learn those secrets of overcoming, to be able to move forward, to be healthy and whole, to put that victimization in its perspective, and to vow that to yourself that you would never allow it to happen again, but if it did, that you would get the help that you need so that you can be healthy and whole and happy in life.
If you've been the victim of a crime and need help, or want to know more about victims' rights, contact the National Center for Victims of Crime at 800-FYI-CALL or ncvc.org.